in the health habit book, I think that all the habits are additive ones. So they're about adding something that's going to be very, very beneficial to your life. Some of those habits will or might replace unhelpful habits or bad habits in inverted commas. I feel like bad habits sounds very judgmental, but I guess like with behavior change, you're either trying to remove bad habits or add in good habits. And sometimes it's a combination of the two that's going to get you closer to, whatever your health goal might be.
All right, welcome to the It's Never About Money community. I'm really excited today, personally excited because I feel like I'm going to learn a lot. There's a lot of things I've been thinking about in 2024. And today, the focus is going to be really around health and career. And I have Dr. Amantha Imber with me, who's an organisational psychologist, founder of behavioural science consultancy Inventium. Amantha is also the host of the #1 ranking business podcast, How I Work, which has had over 2.5 million downloads, where she interviews some of the world's most successful people about their habits, strategies, and rituals. And Amantha's thoughts have appeared in the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Fast Company, and she's the author of 2 best-selling books, The Creativity Formula, The Innovative Formula, and we're going to talk about The Health Habit, her new book as well. How are you, Amantha?
I'm good. It's so funny when people read out my bio because I can always tell if it's a recent one or a really old one.
Oh, is it old?
That's a super old one. I think the podcast is up to about 6 million downloads.
Wow.
And I've done 4 books now. So there we go. It's just
my goodness.
It's always a thing because I always hear people read out my bios when I'm doing speaking gigs and also guesting on podcasts. And it's just, it's just like a little mental trick that I've found.
Well, in truth, when I was reading that, I was astounded by the amount of downloads. Now I'm kind of dumbfounded even more. So I think we're in great hands, and I'm really excited to talk about your most recent book, which will be your 4th book, and I think that'll be our focus today, which I'm excited to talk to you about. So I did ask the question, how are you? And I was thinking about that question as simple as it is. A person that's writing a book called The Health Habit, I would forgive you for feeling, somewhat pressured to answer, I'm fine and I'm good and I'm always great. Do you ever feel the pressure from people, to present that, everything is fine on your side, given the types of topics that you actually specialize and advise on?
Probably I do feel pressure to have had a good night's sleep. I feel like to write a book like The Health Habit and, and rock up to something feeling exhausted would not be on brand. But luckily, most nights I sleep really well and I feel really good. But I reckon probably managing stress is my Achilles heel on the health front. And in The Health Habit, I didn't actually focus on mental health. I deliberately didn't do that, even though I'm a psychologist and I can talk about why. But I'd say I could get better at managing stress, but in terms of managing my physical health, I don't need to lie. I think I actually manage it quite well.
It's interesting. I feel the same way about my own situation. I feel like physically I can manage all of those things. They seem more controllable for some reason. Whereas for me anyway, I know that's different for every single person. But the mental health side of it is always the challenge and the stresses and all of that come up with work. And I was interested in one of our first interactions. I got an email response saying that I'm a lark, and I'm like, I know what that is. I read the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and it's chronotypes. And she's saying that, and no one's ever done that. And I was thinking about it in reference to Matthew Walker's discussions around the fact that kids get up every single morning at the same time, yet they are all biologically inclined to have different timings around when they're most fully alert and so on. So some kids are actually disadvantaged. And what you are doing with Inventium is actually allowing business owners and the employees of business owners to create an environment where they're moving with their biological inclinations. And I really love that. Did I describe that well in terms of what Inventium kind of does from a kind of holistic sense?
Yeah, so that's definitely a practice that we have had at Inventium for years now in terms of working to our chronotype. And for those that haven't come across the term chronotype, which I do find is the majority of people, it's basically the peaks and troughs of our energy levels over a 24-hour period. So broadly speaking, there are three types. There are larks whose energy and alertness peaks early in the morning. There's owls who are the opposite. They come to life like in the afternoon and the night. And then there's middle birds that are kind of like larks, but just a couple of hours delayed, and typically 9 to 12 in the morning are their peak hours. So at Inventium, we work very flexibly. So we encourage people to work to their chronotype. For example, my old CEO, who's since left the business, she was an owl, and I just knew I would never book a meeting with her at 9 in the morning because I just knew I wouldn't get the best out of her. But at 11 in the morning or in the afternoon, she was firing. So it's something that I think about a lot, and it's advice that we give to a lot of our clients at Inventium as well that are trying to improve productivity.
Yeah, because it seems like, you can focus on the 7 or 8 or 9 hours or whatever is recommended in terms of the amount of sleep. But if you're not actually adhering to when you are at your peak, understanding when you are at your peak, and you are, going through tasks that are really important when you are in a lull, that seems counterproductive.
Yeah, it definitely is. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
for me, I do my hardest work.
Yep.
Between the hours of about 8 and 11 a.m., I typically don't do meetings before 11 a.m.
Yep.
And that works for me because I'm aligning my hardest work with my chronotype.
Beautiful. And why did you start Inventium? What was the journey in getting there? It's probably a long journey, but if you could summarize it for us, like, why Inventium? What's it? Why is it so important to you?
Look, in a nutshell, it was a plan B. I'd never set out to be an entrepreneur. My family is not one of entrepreneurs, so that wasn't something that was role modeled to me as
Mm.
a child. But in my 20s, I was working in advertising as a consumer psychologist, and I did that for about 5 years until I felt like I hit my used by date in the industry, and it just no longer felt like fulfilling work that I wanted to be doing. And so I gave my boss 3 months notice and said, I'll be out of here in 3 months because the position that I was in was quite a hard one to recruit for. And I didn't know what I would be doing next. All I kind of had in my mind is that I wanted to go back to my organizational psychology roots, which is what my doctorate was in, and help people in a more meaningful way, as opposed to just help people buy more chocolate bars, which was, part of my job. And I wanted to get a job somewhere else. I thought I'd probably be in a role that helped people learn and develop and grow. I'm really passionate about that. And I interviewed for a bunch of different jobs, and there was one that I really wanted, and they didn't want me. So that was pretty sad.
Sad. Yeah.
Sad for me,
Yeah.
and maybe sad for them as well in retrospect.
Yeah.
Although the company did close its Sydney office a couple of years later, so maybe it all
Maybe
worked out
fortuitous.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But then otherwise, I couldn't find an organisation that I wanted to work for, where I felt like I'd be working with really good IP, and also where there would be a good
Mm.
culture fit. And so plan B, and this was, a couple of friends said, why don't you just start your own business? And that was not on my radar at all. And this is going back about 16 or 17 years now. Like, I feel like, every man and his dog starts their own business these
Yeah.
days, and it's
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
really normal thing to do. But it
Yeah.
certainly wasn't a normal thing to do for a woman in her late 20s back in 2007 when I started Inventium. So Inventium was a plan B. I just thought, can't find anywhere I want to work. I'll just start my own thing. I'll create my own workplace that I really like. And obviously the cultural fit will be good because I am the culture. And obviously I had no employees on day one. And then I wanted to specialize at the time in creativity and innovation and bring a more evidence based approach to how companies could be more innovative because no one was
Yeah.
doing that at the time.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that was the idea. Inventium has since broadened out quite a bit, but that's why I started my business.
It's amazing. I mean, there's probably a whole bunch of things we could unpack there, but I want to go to begin with. I'm going to get to productivity later, but I want to go to begin with the new book, The Health Habit. I've started reading it, and I was able to read it whilst reading another book because you allowed me to do that. Because one of the essential features of this book was that I could choose my own adventure and I could implement things on the run rather than it being this feeling where I had to attack it from woe to go. And then I get this influx of information and then I'm like, okay, now what? So, I started with the nutrition page and I started around some of the tricks and tips around the habit formation. So what I wanted to, talk to you about is, given the uniqueness of this book, it's not just about health per se, but there's some relevance in the way you can tackle the habits. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my 2024 revelations, which may be completely wrong. And I just wanted to start with the idea that I'm a future focused person. I'm a goal oriented person. And what's been happening predominantly is that I do mostly achieve my goals, but I drive myself crazy in doing so. And what I found is that it's mostly my habits, the formation of my habits that actually achieve my goals. The focus on the goal outcome is not overly helpful. So what I did was I wrote down my goals in the center of a mind map, and then I started to write down habits around it. And habits that I thought were low hanging fruit and that I enjoyed and it were wins. So almost building an ecosystem. And then I deleted the goal as an idea because I thought, well, it's actually these habits. So I wonder, what you think of that idea as a starting point to, actually achieving goals rather than this sort of end idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wrote about that in my last book, Time Wise, the idea of focusing on systems rather than goals.
Yeah.
And I kind of I think of as of habits as kind of shorter things that don't take as long to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of systems as something that you put in place, and you might have daily systems, but those systems might take 1 or 2 hours to do. So let me give an example and also talk about why I believe in systems over goals. So, don't get me wrong. I do believe that we should know where we're going on our journey and where we're aiming for. Like, there needs to
Yep.
be some kind of a target. Otherwise, it's really easy to get off course and not be mindful about our time. But what I do know to be true about goals is that once you set a goal, and
Mm.
let's just say a simple goal in the context of health, like, let's just say you want to lose 5 kilos, which is, not an uncommon goal for people, particularly
Mm.
in January as we're having this
Yeah,
chat.
it sure is. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, until you see that 5 kilos wiped off off your bathroom scales in the morning, you are in a state of failure. Like, when you've lost 2 kilos, you're still failing because you haven't lost five. When you've lost
Mm.
4.5, you're still in a state of failure because you haven't got to the 5 kilo mark. And that is ultimately very demotivating, to be in this constant state of failure when you're trying to achieve a goal.
Mm.
And then you get to the goal and you succeed. But then what do you do as soon as you succeed? You set your next goal, and then you're back in a state of failure,
Yeah.
which is kind of a little bit crazy. And so I got this tip from Professor Adam Alter, who's at the Stern School of Business in NYU, and he says what he does to overcome this problem with goal setting is that he sets systems. So he thinks about what is the end state that he wants to get to. So let's just say he's working on his next book, so he needs to write, a 70,000 word draft of the manuscript. And instead of having that as his goal, which would be very demotivating because, you're essentially failing for months and months until you've got those 70,000 words, he has a daily system where he says, okay, I have to write 1,000 words every day. That is my system. And the good thing
Mm.
about having a daily system is that you can be winning every single day. And then eventually, if it's the right system, you're going to reach that goal of 70,000 words.
Mm.
I'd be curious as to, I don't think it's about crossing out the goal
No.
entirely, because you need to know where you're going. But I think those daily systems or weekly systems, and if you design those systems well, that if you do them, they will get you to your goal, is a much better way of operating when it comes to behavior and getting to where you want to be.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, innate, sort of intuitively, I feel like the goal has to be exciting and it has to imprint on the habit in the sense that if the goal isn't exciting for you, it's going to be very laborious in being able to implement the system. So I think there is a need for the goal. I've just been so goal oriented and I kind of know what they are intuitively, that I almost want to remove them out of the equation because they're kind of frustrating me.
Yeah, it's funny. Look, I do like goals, and at
Yeah.
Inventium we use OKRs, which were made famous by Google, where we've got objectives and key results. And so I do actually, I'm like, my podcast studio is at my desk where I work, and like I've actually
Yeah.
got them printed out next to me just to kind of keep them front of mind. But
Yeah.
then, when I'm designing my week, I think about, okay, what are the systems or actions that I need to take to move me closer.
Mm.
Yeah, I really do love having systems in place.
Now, this book is kind of deeply personal as well, because you go through some of the things that you've gone through in your own health journey, um, and some of the habits that you've had to dismantle, as well. Could you maybe briefly take us through some of that?
Yeah, so I feel like I've conquered a few health challenges, which I mean, it makes it sound like I've had cancer or something. And knock on wood, I haven't had major things like that happen to me.
No.
But for me, I've had very run of the mill, common, but ultimately, like just problematic things that I've tried to solve for myself. So I suffered from chronic insomnia for like most of my adult life, certainly during my 20s and again in my 30s. And for anyone that has trouble sleeping, or has suffered from insomnia, it just makes the rest of your life
It's the worst.
incredibly hard. Like,
The worst.
going through a day, yeah, feeling exhausted. I mean, you just can't be at your peak for anything.
Mm. Mm.
So certainly I talk about how I tackled the insomnia, and and now, like, 6 nights out of 7, I'll have a great night's sleep, and I don't know how I was functioning in this world, as a useful human being, before I conquered that. I also had a crazy bad sugar addiction. Again, like, during my childhood, loved any sweet treats, but during my 20s and 30s, not too many days would go past without multiple chocolate bars and mixed lollies and all sorts of things. So again, just terribly bad, for your health, but also just your day to day energy levels. And again, like, I haven't had sugar. It certainly hasn't been a daily habit for over a decade now, or about a decade, about on 10 years, I think we're at. And again, just a game changer for how I feel day to day. Yeah, also, like, on the movement front, I was, the kind of kid that was picked last for every sports team at school. And, you kind of form the self identity that, okay, I guess I'm just not a fit or sporty person.
Mm.
And
Mm. Mm.
that's just my lot in life. And so I won't strive for fitness or strength or anything like that. But over the last 5 years, have completely turned that around through adopting
Mm.
different habits. So, I feel like the challenges that I've faced are ones that probably, hopefully, a lot of listeners can relate to.
Mm.
But yeah, for me, absolutely, health is just my number one value, and I
Yeah.
obsess about it a lot.
It's great. So is in the habit dismantling the need to actually habit form, in the sense that one of the strategies of habit dismantling might be actually putting things in place instead of that thing that you've been doing compulsively. And I imagine sometimes it can be compulsive as a result of some other underlying need to pacify yourself, which needs to be addressed as well, potentially.
Yeah, so look, in the health habit book, I think that all the habits are additive ones. So they're
Hmm.
about adding something that's going to be very, very beneficial to your
Mm.
life. Some of
Mm.
those habits will or might replace unhelpful habits or bad habits, in inverted commas. I feel like bad
Yeah.
habits sounds very
Yeah.
judgmal. But certainly I've had many bad
Maladaptive.
habits. Maladaptive habits, that sounds a bit nicer. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess, like, with behavior change, you're either trying to remove bad habits or add in good habits. And sometimes it's a combination of the two that's going to get you closer to, whatever your health goal might be.
Hmm. So so you coined this concept of habit heroes. What's a habit hero? How do we form a habit? Like, yeah.
Yeah, so for context, so the health habit book is divided into two parts. It's a bit
Yes.
different from your normal health book. And
Yes.
why I wrote the book is because I love reading books on health. And every month, go to the local bookshop and I'll have a look at what are the latest health books coming out and the latest fads out there, and I, find it really interesting, and I've bought lots of those books. And, I was thinking to myself one day, like, if any of these books actually worked and they, fixed our health, so to speak, then
There
like
wouldn't
this
be
whole
so many
section
more new books.
that
books.
there wouldn't be any new books, because like we wouldn't have this problem to solve as humans.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they don't, because inevitably what these books do is they just give us information. And what we know as psychologists is that information alone doesn't change behavior.
That's
And
right.
in the meantime, there's this whole other section of the bookstore that is all about habit change and behavior change. And I love all those books too as a psychologist. That's
But then
kind of
there's
my
no
bread and butter.
information.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of my bread and butter. And like I was thinking one day as I was, contemplating what do I want my next book to be about, is I was thinking, like, why have these two genres never met? Like, why do the health books stay over there and then the habit change books stay in this completely
Mm,
different section, when
mm,
really you need those two books to combine and have a book baby to actually make sustainable change? And so that was the idea for the health habit. And so in the book, the first half is all about the health habits. So, how can we improve our sleep, movement, and nutrition in terms of what are the most impactful things that we can do that are sort of less commonly known, perhaps underutilized strategies? Like, we all know that we need to eat more vegetables and, stop
mm,
scrolling on our phone in bed. But what are the
mm,
things that maybe we don't know that are going to have a
mhm,
big impact? And then
mhm.
the second part of the book actually helps to diagnose, like, what is standing in the way? What is the psychological barrier getting in the way for you making a change for good? And
Mm.
I talk about four of the most common barriers or habit hijackers that can get in the way to making change. So, very briefly, there's
Yeah.
motivational barriers, which is where you feel like you have to do something as opposed to want to do something. So, maybe your doctor has said, you need to move more or you need to eat better, and like that you should, but you can't really be bothered. You feel like you have to do it.
On that one,
Yeah,
is that sometimes in terms of your engagement with that motivation intrinsically, is that a framing question? Is that a question around the way you think about that
yeah,
issue to you?
it certainly can be. Absolutely. Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
It's generally that you framed it as, this is something that I have to do, but it feels unpleasant to do, and that's why you don't want to do it.
because like everything's a choice, right? And if the question is, if the issue is framing, then you could simply say, well, I'm a father and I have kids. If I'm not doing this, I don't
Mm.
get to enjoy them longer term. Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
That can be really helpful.
mm, mm.
So yes, that's the first hijacker.
Yep.
Then
Yep.
the second one is all about relational hijackers or obstacles. So this is where, like, the people in your life or the social norms that you're surrounded by
Mm,
are kind of taking you off in a different direction that's maybe not in line with your health goals and what you're striving for. Then
yep.
there's environmental barriers or hijackers, where the physical environment where you live and work is just working against you. Like, maybe you're trying to quit booze, for example, but there's like
A drinking culture.
several bottles of, yeah, drinking
Yeah.
culture in your family, or lots of bottles of wine at eye level in the
Hmm.
pantry.
Hmm.
That's not going to be very helpful for you. And then there's cognitive barriers or hijackers. So this is where you're just feeling, overwhelmed, exhausted, tired, burnt out. And when you're feeling that way, you've just got limited resources available to be able to make a change. And so in the book, I talk about habit heroes for overcoming each of those four obstacles. And in the book, you can diagnose what's your main obstacle, and then you can get some habit heroes to help improve your behavior.
I love that. So the dismantling of these habits can be aided by understanding these four fundamentals and trying to combat them in some way.
That's right. And so essentially, the book helps you put together a personalized plan that's just for you. So it's not just about knowing the health habits to change, it's going, okay, this is the thing that I want to do more of. This is the barrier in the way. Maybe it's a motivational one. And therefore, the habit hero of, let's say, temptation bundling, which is one of my favorites. Put that in place, and that will help make your new health habits stick for good.
Mm. And when it comes to dismantling habits, are the earliest programmed ones in childhood also the ones that are hardest to reprogram? Last in, first out sort of idea?
Hmm. like, I haven't read any research about that. Like,
Okay.
it kind of makes sense, but then I'm thinking about, my own life and, like, I think about, the insomnia that I suffered from for many, many years. And I don't think there was anything in my childhood that led to me being a bad sleeper. And I think, by and large, I probably slept quite well and, had good sleep hygiene as a child. And I wasn't part of the generation that had mobile phones to use in bed. Like that just wasn't a thing. Like I'm in my mid 40s. And I really think that started probably maybe when I was 19 or 20. So I think about that as an example and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that had nothing to do with my childhood. But then sugar, like, yeah, definitely my friends, I wasn't friends like with the sporty group who were probably, eating lots of fruit and veg. Instead, my friends and I would like to get a packet of, Samboy salt and vinegar chips or a jam donut from 7-Eleven. That was more our style after school. So that probably didn't serve me well for future
No.
habits. So kind of, yes and no.
Okay. And this idea of a habit being formed because there's a short term payoff and it's almost an unconscious habit versus habits that seem to be more adaptive based upon a goal that might be more long term. Is that kind of the way it works where we find these, habits that aren't serving us so well is more around an unconscious kind of gravitation to something just because it has some sort of maybe hedonistic short term
Yeah,
hit?
look, that's certainly a thing. So, there are biases at play that bias us towards short-term gratification over long-term results. I mean, that's why things like social media are really great at pulling us in because there's short-term gratification. Uh, and the sort of the behavior that will serve us in the long term that might be getting off Instagram and reading a book and learning something or spending time with our kids or things like that. It's like the payoff is often not as immediate.
Yeah. And I note in one of your recent blogs you talk about um, where a habit becomes uh, maybe rigid and non-flexible. Is Can you talk to us a little bit about having some flexibility in our habits so we're not kind of driving ourselves a little bit batty?
Yeah, so this came from some research from Professor Katie Milkman, where she and her colleagues were looking at the impact of having like a rigid routine, and this was specifically around going to the gym. So in this study, people had to go to the gym. I think it was like first thing in the morning or something like that. And that was one group, and then another group had to go to the gym, but they were given flexibility in terms of when they could go. And like intuitively, I certainly thought, oh, well, if you've got like a rigid routine, it's like that's easier to become a habit because you just know at 6 a.m. I'm going to the gym. But what Milkman found is that those that had a more flexible schedule were actually more likely to go to the gym more frequently.
Mm,
It's kind of it's almost like this sort of all or nothing kind of approach. It's like, well, you know, like if I'm sleeping in past 6 a.m., but that's the time that I go to the gym, it's like, whatever, I just won't go today.
you're
And
speaking to me, Amantha. Like it's all or nothing for me.
yeah,
It's really hard. I don't know how to balance. That's it's an interesting thing.
yeah. Yeah. So, certainly I think like if you have a more, flexible mindset in terms of, okay, I'm going to try to go to the gym today, but
Yep.
I'm just going to be flexible in terms of when that might happen.
Mm,
It's easier to just like it's harder to just, prematurely throw the towel in and just go, whatever, I'll just have the day off.
yeah.
So flexibility over rigidity definitely wins when it comes
Wins.
to trying to
Mm,
change your habits.
yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And, I was thinking about like anyone who's going to start a book on health, the the definition of health is in itself in question. So, like, you know, what's going to be in the book and what's going to be left out of the book? How did you decide, as an example, not to put psychological or spiritual or whatever type of health in there? What were the fundamentals in this book?
Yeah, that was a big decision. So I I wanted I mean, like when you write a book, or and you're on contract. I mean, a book can be any length, but certainly the contract that I was on was a book that was 60 to 70,000 words. And so as an
Right.
author, you need to make a choice to go, I can't cover everything, but
Mm,
what I do cover, I want to cover well, and I want to have a bit of depth about it. And um, even though I am a psychologist, and it would be kind of obvious to talk about mental health strategies, given that's part of my training. I thought, man, that's a book unto itself,
it
and
is. Mm,
I and kind of what I was really interested in is exploring physical health, and really, the main pillars are sleep, movement, and nutrition. Like if you've got
mm,
those three things working pretty smoothly, then your physical health, in terms of what is within your control, is going to be pretty good. And so I just thought I'm going to like constrain the health side of things to physical health. That feels like it felt like a sort of logical and sensible way of just putting in some constraints.
mm,
And then
mm.
certainly in terms of mental health, like I'm really interested in that. I'm interested, in stress and well-being and happiness, and what are the determinants of those outcomes. But I kind of thought, look, it's either a whole other book,
Yeah.
or it's certainly beyond the scope. Like I thought, I can't include this as well and do it the justice that I
It
want. So that
makes a
was
lot.
more, yeah, it was a
ma-
creative decision,
It
really.
makes a lot of sense. Like you have not only gone through physical health, but you've also gone through this whole habit formation side of it as well, which is quite a bit to get in. So that makes a lot of sense to me. When it comes to these three pillars, I really wanted to just have a chat about them. I could have a whole episode recording on just this easily. I love it. But tell us the three fundamentals, and perhaps what we need to be observing for each.
Sure. So yeah. So in the health habit, I talk about sleep, movement, and nutrition. And
Yep,
I'm just thinking maybe I'll just like talk about like one health habit that I personally
absolutely. Let's do the low hanging
use a
fruit.
lot.
Yep,
Yeah, yeah. So yes, I'm just because because interesting in the health habit, with the different health habits, I give them each a degree of difficulty, because some are harder to implement, others are
mm,
quite easy. So
hmm,
look, from the sleep point of view, probably one of the easier ones to do is the fifth of the sleep habits that I talk about, which is um, taking a light shower, which is what I talk
mm.
about. So just like we would take a shower underwater, for hygiene reasons, hopefully people do that, is what is also really good in terms of improving our sleep quality and also our energy during the day, is what I think about as giving ourselves a light shower, which is where, ideally as soon after waking as possible, go out and get some like natural light into your eyes.
Amazing.
So all you need is about 10 minutes at a minimum out in daylight. And look, if it's dark when you wake up, depending on where in the world or which season you're in, a light box will also do the trick. Just make sure it's about at least 1 or 2,000 lux levels in terms of a light box. And by doing that, you're resetting your body clock. And what research has found is that even just after doing that for 1 week, in one particular study, for the following 3 weeks, people had more energy during the day, and they also had a better sleep quality at night. So, very easy way to improve your sleep.
And I imagine it would combat some of that seasonal. Um,
Affective
uh,
disorder.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Look,
I
I imagine it would be good. I haven't actually looked at it like
they have those
in.
light boxes for that purpose as
Yeah, they
well,
do.
for
Yeah,
people. So, and I imagine,
yeah.
like, as you're talking, it seems like, oh yeah, I get light, but when you actually think about it, sometimes, even for me, I was aware of this sort of stuff, and I'm conscious of it, but I just sometimes don't get out in the first period of time in the morning, and I imagine a lot of people would be the same when you really think about the sequence of events from getting it from in being inside your home into the car to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why
Mm.
like a dog is quite good. A dog can motivate you to just
Yeah.
like get out
Yeah.
for a morning walk, or
Yeah.
it can even just be about lifestyle changes, like, instead of eating breakfast inside, like if you've got a backyard or a balcony, just,
Yeah.
have your breakfast outside. Or just do a walk around the block first thing in the
Yeah.
morning. Which is also good just to get moving as well.
That's great. So, what about moving?
So moving. So Probably one of my favorite strategies with movement is around how we should move after a meal. So, and look, this also does relate to the nutrition part of the book, and I will say the nutrition section of the book was definitely the hardest one to write. Like, there's a lot of agreement from scientists and researchers and health experts around the world. Like, what do we need to do to get a better night's sleep, and what should we
Mm,
do in terms of movement and getting more fit, and using movement to reduce mortality rates, like the chance of premature death. But nutrition, like, there's a lot of mixed findings there. But something that
yeah.
look, you'd be hard pressed to find someone that doesn't agree with this is that ideally we should aim to have our blood glucose or blood sugar levels, same thing, be as stable as possible. So
Mm.
you'd want to minimize your blood glucose levels spiking and crashing during the day. And while you might never have monitored your blood glucose levels, if you have eaten a meal and then gone into a massive energy slump
Food
afterwards,
coma,
or
we call it.
like, yeah, a food coma. If that's basically your blood glucose
Yeah.
levels spiking and crashing, and you want to avoid that. I mean, not only does that just feel like rubbish when it's
Mm,
happening, but
mm.
it's also like it's a precursor to things like type 2 diabetes, which
Yes.
are things that are somewhat avoidable, with lifestyle changes. So in the movement there was a really long context to basically go. One of my favorite things in the movement chapter is one really effective way to use movement to stabilize your blood glucose levels after eating, no matter what your meal is. About half an hour after you've finished eating, go for a 10-minute walk.
Amazing.
This can be a leisurely walk, or just like movement of some kind. And researchers found that this will significantly reduce the blood glucose spike from the meal that you've just eaten, like by about 60 to 70%. So it's a really significant reduction just by going for a little 10-minute wander. So certainly my partner and I try to do this. We'll try to go for a walk after dinner instead of just going, oh, we're just going to, chill on the couch and read or chat or whatever. We'll make sure that we do a short walk around
Yeah,
the
it's not
block.
long. Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
long.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a quick walk.
amazing. And it's an interesting segue into one that I found in there around nutrition, where if you've got a plate and you've got your proteins and your carbs, and you've got your vegetables as well there. Like, if you actually you're in the sequence have your vegetables first, it actually lowers your blood glucose as well. Is that do I get
Yeah,
that
that's
correct?
exactly right. Yeah, so I love this one. I think it's so interesting.
Yeah.
That it's not so much about what you eat, although yes, that matters, but how you eat is a huge determinant of like what the nutritional choices that you're making have on your health. So what we know from research is that if, let's say, you're having an average Australian dinner of like a chicken breast or a steak, and then some green veggies and maybe like a, baked potato or some white rice or bread or something like that. If you can eat your vegetables first, then the protein and fats component, which, might be a steak or some chicken or whatever the protein is, followed by and finishing with the carbs, so like the potato or the rice, again, you're going to significantly lower your blood glucose response. So
Mm,
again, and it's around the levels of around 60 to 70%. So it's not just a small reduction in your blood glucose spike, it's quite a
mhm,
big one. And
mhm.
obviously, if you're eating something like spag bowl, you can't apply this, obviously,
Eat the
but
carrot in the
where
bolaise. I don't
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like
know.
where you can
Yeah.
make that choice. I think of it as like the save the best for last
Mm,
strategies.
mm.
Like, because no one like prefers broccoli over like chips, for example.
Yeah.
So
I was wondering how to segue into productivity. And I think the way that I would is to say that a lot of people, when it comes to the health front, would simply say the reason my health is falling is because I don't have enough time. I'm too busy at work. And I remember looking at business owners' budgets. Often there's a huge allocation to restaurants and so on. And one of the things that you talk about in Inventium, which was my ears pricked up as soon as I saw this, because I've been thinking about it for quite a while, um, is the 4-day working week. Building, efficiencies, obviously, to be able to perform at a certain level, but also having that additional day up your sleeve. Um, why did you implement that 4-day working week for yourself, and what drove the idea?
So what drove the idea? It was something we were thinking about. It was about like April or May in 2020. So it was just after COVID had hit. It was a tough time for our business, and and we as a team we were thinking about like what can we do to just improve morale and how people were feeling. Like we're a business that's typically had high engagement scores, but obviously, like when just like crazy stuff's going on in the world, like you're just not feeling good in life. And so our CEO at the time suggested, well, what we maybe we should try the 4-day week, which we had been reading about. A couple of months prior, I'd interviewed Andrew Barnes on the How I Work podcast, who's like the co-founder of the movement, if you like. And I'd been thinking about it, and I just thought, oh, we'll wait for this COVID thing to pass, and then I'll, give it my full attention. But given our CEO had suggested, I thought, oh, why not? Why wouldn't we try it now? And so, as a business, we did a 6-month experiment. We set a bunch of hypotheses that we were, looking to see if we moved to this 4-day week, would engagement increase? Would stress reduce? Would productivity increase? Would it have a good effect on tenure and intention to stay? And all the sorts of variables that you care about as a business owner. And so we ran it for 6 months, and it was amazing. All our hypotheses were supported, and so we made it permanent. And I think we were the first company in Australia to adopt the 4-day week, and it's now been 3.5 years since we've been running it. And yeah, I would say it's been a real game changer to how we work.
I like the principle of the idea that you try it on yourself before you advocate for it.
Mm.
And so that's something that's Inventium is about as well, advocating for the 4-day working week and helping people implement this.
We do. We've got quite a few clients, and I mean, so many organisations that are wanting to adopt the 4-day week do give us a call, and they either want to hear about our experience, and and certainly with other companies, we get our hands dirty and we help them. So probably. I feel like Unilever are probably one of the higher profile organisations, certainly here in Australia and New Zealand, that have adopted it. And, it was really fun. We got to work with them and do quite a lot of training around how to help people create better work habits and improve their productivity, because ultimately you really need to change the way that you work and your work
Mm.
habits in order to successfully move to the 4-day week. Like, it doesn't just happen by going, okay, we're not going to work Fridays anymore, go. Like, that's sort of setting yourself up for failure.
So the question is, do you implement the 4-day working week without the efficiencies and then realize you're not achieving your goals and start to change the efficiencies by virtue of force? Or do you try to do it ahead of the game? Do you know what I'm trying to
You
do?
yeah, you need to do it ahead of the game or as you're making that shift. I think it's really hard when you do it and you're several months into the 4-day week, because you've potentially caused people quite a lot of stress and you
Yeah.
haven't set them up for success.
Yep. And so I imagine, again, some of this 4-day working week sort of idea is in the book, The Innovation Formula, because some of
No,
being a
it's
bit, no, not really? Okay.
Yeah, so the innovation formula was all around how to create a culture of innovation. Time
Okay.
wise, my third book was all
Time-wise.
about productivity and thinking about how we can use our time more wisely. So certainly there are a lot of different strategies in time wise that I share about how you can achieve more better output, with the same or less resources.
Is there anything that you can share with us now around that? Like, is there anything?
Look, I think meeting culture is a really big one.
Okay.
So certainly with the clients that we work with, and we work with organisations that don't do the 4-day week, they just want to improve productivity. That's like a typical client on the
Yeah.
productivity front.
Yeah, yeah.
But we find that people are just drowning in meetings. I think the average person attends like 21 hours of meetings a week, like for the average like professional services or knowledge worker, and most meetings are not productive. They're not efficient. They're not particularly well run. Like, people are invited to meetings that don't need to be there. I personally try to minimize the amount of meetings that I'm in. And like, even if you can just whip your meeting culture into shape, you are going to save several hours per week. And, really what you're looking for is, you're looking for a way to save, 6 to 8 hours per week in order to make the successful change to a 4-day week, if that's your goal.
Yeah, it makes sense. Maybe this is more, I don't know if it's more for a smaller business or a larger business, but are there any sort of old school tropes or narratives that prevent business leaders from kind of feeling comfortable, despite the evidence that it'll be okay, feeling comfortable to implement it? Do they feel some sort of guilt? They're not working hard enough, that sort of
Mm.
idea?
I think it's just, the outdated view that we, need to be looking at hours over outcomes. And I feel like that's become a bit of a cliche. I feel like a lot of people talk about that now, but still, if you were to really drill down into leaders, sort of mindsets and assumptions, like if someone is, like sending you an email at 7 o'clock at night, a lot of leaders unconsciously go, man, they're working hard, good on them, they're
Mm,
awesome. But
mhm,
you really need to make sure, firstly, that the goals that you set for your team are quantifiable, objective goals. And that's why I like OKRs, because key results are, quantifiable and objective, and go, like, are the people that I'm managing achieving their goals? And if you can clearly measure that, then like hours become irrelevant. And if you're going to move to the 4-day week, you really need to be of the mindset that it is about outcomes, not hours. Otherwise, you will go, oh, well, I'm losing a day's worth of work. But the reality is, you're probably not, because the research would suggest that most people are not productive for, a lot of the day.
I think when you map out some of the tasks you should be doing and shouldn't be doing, you probably find a lot of idle hours. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm
Mm,
not sure that everyone does that. I know in small business, sometimes I'll be looking at it and going, am I actually, should I be doing this? Or is there some technology that can actually outsource this? Because
mm,
this ain't helping clients that I'm doing this.
yeah.
But yeah. Um, so I'm just wondering whether you have any insight around business leaders, families, a singular pursuit of money. Does that hinder um, the living a meaningful and healthy life?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, I mean, if there's a struggle with money, then that is absolutely going to have an impact um, on happiness and stress levels. So I think,
Hmm.
to a certain point, money really matters. But then beyond that point, people think it matters more than it actually does.
Mm, mm, mm. And when you heard about um, the name of our podcast, it's never about money. What comes to mind for you? Does it resonate? The idea?
Mm. Uh, yeah,
Would you
it
like to tweak it?
does. No, 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 no. Like, look, it certainly does as a business. I mean, Inventium is a B corporation, which means, and this is, we've been a registered B Corp for about 7 or 8 years now, which means that we do very deliberately put purpose over profit and put people over profit as well. So we will certainly knock back a lot of work with companies we feel are, not adding to the world in a particularly great way. There are industries that we just blanket don't work with. Just as some small examples of how we put purpose over profit.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, I've got some fan based questions here, just a couple. What have been the most important lessons you have learnt in leading Inventium? It's one of the questions that I was asked to ask you.
Hmm. Um, hmm. Yeah. I think at the moment I'm sort of like at the moment, like I've with my past CEO having left, I've stepped back into that role, and for the last sort of almost 5 years, I've managed to extricate myself from
From that. Mm.
running the business and being hands on, and having to sort of be in the weeds, and that allowed me to play to my strengths. I think my strengths are creating things and writing and speaking and those sorts of things. And I feel like I can do those well. And, I've spent lots of time practicing those things as well.
Hmm.
And so now I feel, like I love my team at Inventium, but I feel like I'm not in the role where I can play to my strengths. And I think I'm acutely aware of that. And so, that's certainly a lesson, um, that's front of mind at the moment. It's like, people talk about playing to your strengths, but also do that for the sake of your energy as well. Like, I'm so much
Mm.
more energized when I know that I'm spending my time doing the things that I love, as opposed to doing the things that, okay, I really need to do that right now, in this sort of transition period between a new CEO. But it's like, I feel like, I'm so much more energized when I can do the things that I love and that, I know that I'm pretty good at.
And I notice for myself that my tolerance to do things that I don't love declines with age. As I've
Mm.
gotten older, I'm more intolerant of doing the things that I don't love. And I can
Mm.
only imagine as I continue to get more experienced, I'll get more frustrated with that sort of stuff.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, what excites you about the future, Amantha?
I am Yeah, I think I just get excited about like creating new things and going
Mm.
like, what could I bring into this world that's going to help people in a really cool and different way? And like for me, like it's all about practical and proven stuff. Like, what is the science telling us, and how can I make that really practical so that anyone can apply it and lead a healthier and happier and more productive life? So, um, just creation in general, but then there's various projects that are that I'm either working on or on the back burner, that are the things that like light me up.
Well, on that front, I think the mere fact that we've done this episode together and that I'm able to disseminate it to the people that listen to It's Never About Money is really exciting, because I think there's a lot of things that I've learned. And I know that there's also the ability for them to follow up with the purchase of your book and advocating for it, which I certainly will be. And I'm reading it as we speak, which is it's fantastic. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about where the book can be bought and how people can connect with you.
So, the easiest way to get the book is search for The Health Habit wherever you get books, or go to your local bookseller. It's always nice to support the local booksellers,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
definitely do that if you want a hard copy. But there's audiobook and ebook, etc. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm very easy to find. If you search for Amantha, which is like Samantha without the S, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn or Instagram, or even just go to amantha.com, and you will quickly find ways to consume more of the content that I'm putting out there.
So my final question to you, which I ask every time, is what your spirit animal is and why.
Hmm. I do not have a spirit animal, but I've always been a fan of wombats, really for no reason other
Yeah,
than they're just quite cute.
cute.
But I
Yeah.
do not identify with wombats or as a wombat. But I always think they're fun to go check out at the zoo.
Good enough answer for me. Thanks for joining me and contributing. It's been great.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.